With nearly 30,000 cafes across the globe, Starbucks has become more than just a household name. From its iconic cups, often adorned with misspelled names, to the espresso inside them, Starbucks has catapulted from one coffee bean shop in Seattle to a sprawling $80 billion business over the last 47 years. Starbucks sales account for 57% of the total cafe market. Yes, 57%. Nearly two-thirds of all coffee sold at cafes in the US comes from a Starbucks. But this impressive expansion hasn't come without growing pains. With more than 14,000 locations in the US alone, Starbucks has spread itself too thin. Having too many stores has led to fewer transactions at individual stores. To compensate, the company has raised prices. But doing this too quickly or too often can drive customers away. So how did this happen? And what's a coffee giant to do about it? The year is 1970. Three college friends, Zev Siegel, Jerry Baldwin, and Gordon Boker, decide to get into the coffee business. They found a mentor in Alfred Peet, founder of Peet's Coffee, and the man responsible for bringing custom coffee roasting to the U.S.
He knew the coffee industry inside and out, especially the gourmet end. He was the most educated coffee guy in the country at that time.
So with Peet's help, the three friends opened Starbucks, a coffee bean shop and roastery at Seattle's famous Pike Place Market in 1971. Peet provided the young entrepreneurs with roasted coffee beans and connected them with coffee brokers until they could set up their own roastery and source their own beans. For the first decade, the founders opened 5 more locations in Seattle. At this point, contemporary coffee consumers might have noticed a glaring absence: actual coffee drinks. But that's the thing about the 70s coffee culture. It didn't really exist outside the home.
There were no coffee bars, nor was there much of a demand for espresso-based drinks. You purchased coffee beans and you either took them home as beans or we ground them for you in the store. Nobody expected to get a beverage at a Starbucks coffee store until after 1980.
Starbucks' initial focus was bringing high-quality beans to consumers who were more accustomed to instant or canned coffee. But that changed with the addition of one man.
The company hired its first really professional director of marketing and sales. And that man was Howard Schultz. And he couldn't figure out why we weren't selling beverages.
In 1983, Schultz travels to Italy and returns with an idea: turn the coffee bean stores into cafes. Starbucks served its first latte the next year. The experiment was a success, and 4 years later, Schultz partnered with investors and bought Starbucks for $3.8 million. He was only 34 at the time. Schultz pursued a strategy of aggressive expansion. By the time the company went public in 1992, it had 165 stores. By 1996, it had opened more than 1,000 locations, including its first international cafes in Japan and Singapore. Growth was so rapid that just 3 years later, Starbucks opened its 2,000th location.
Once they found a business model that worked, that translated to other geographies, that gave them the opportunity to really accelerate growth, really put the pedal to the metal in terms of expanding across the globe.
Schultz switched from CEO to executive chairman in 2000, at which time Starbucks operated 3,500 stores in more than a dozen countries. Between 2000 and 2007, the number of Starbucks cafes more than quadrupled, from 3,500 to over 15,000. During this period, the company opened an average of 1,500 stores every year, including 2,500 in 2007 alone. Sales shot up from $2 billion to $9.4 billion. Consumers were increasingly ditching their kitchen mugs for these iconic paper-to-go cups. But then Starbucks hit a wall. The 2007 financial crash. That year, its rapid growth screeched to a halt, and its stock price plummeted by 50% as cash-strapped consumers backed away from pricey coffee habits.
The Great Recession was devastating for the restaurant industry. What we typically saw was more trading out, so consumers taking a pause on that everyday luxury that Starbucks offered.
So Starbucks brought back Howard Schultz. This news alone caused Starbucks stock to shoot up by 9%. Schultz halted growth and focused on customer experience. He shuttered cafes, more than 600 in 2008 and another 300 in 2009, and laid off around 6,700 baristas. A month after his return, Schultz ordered Starbucks to close all of its U.S. locations for one afternoon, so he could retrain more than 135,000 baristas about how to make its signature espresso. Schultz's goal was to remind customers what they loved about the brand by making the stores an experience, not just a place to get a quick coffee. They stopped selling breakfast sandwiches and brought back in-house grinding, infusing the cafes once again with that fresh coffee aroma. Schultz even mandated the removal of automatic espresso machines. These made service faster but removed much of the romance and theater of watching baristas craft each cup of coffee. Schultz's makeover worked. The company's stock soared more than 143% in 2009, and same-store sales rebounded. Starbucks has posted positive same-store sales ever since. During Schultz's makeover of the cafes, Starbucks barely opened any new stores, but the pace picked up again in 2012. By 2017, Starbucks opened nearly 3,000 more locations, ending the year with 28,000 cafes around the world. However, this brings us back to the first problem: profit cannibalization. Oversaturation, particularly in urban locations, has spread sales thin. Because Starbucks has so many locations, customers don't have to be loyal to just one. So even if Starbucks' overall sales are growing, its individual same-store sales won't reflect it. Compounding this problem are changing consumer preferences. People are shying away from sugar-laden calorie bombs, which happens to be one of Starbucks' staples. These signature frappuccinos contain an average of 57 grams of sugar. That's more than double the recommended daily limit of sugar. So to combat these problems, Starbucks is changing once again. The company announced the closure of 150 stores in 2019. That may seem like a drop in the bucket for a sprawling company like Starbucks, but it's 3 times the number of stores it usually closes each year. The company will still open stores, but future growth will be more focused. Additionally, decadent drinks topped with whipped cream are taking a back seat. Instead, the company is pushing lighter drinks like cold brew and its fruity refreshers. The company also plans to roll out delivery to a quarter of its company-owned stores by the middle of 2019. Perhaps the company's biggest undertaking is its new line of upscale stores, Starbucks Reserve Roasteries. These massive 20,000 square foot stores are designed to be a tourist destination. Here, Starbucks baristas and bartenders experiment with different brewing methods and craft new, innovative beverages. These have proven popular. In the first weeks, the Shanghai Roastery made an average of $64,000 every day, which is double what a regular cafe makes in a week. The company has opened 4 roasteries so far, with plans for 2 more.
It doesn't look and feel like anything else that Starbucks has. Those are the kind of experiential stores, the high-end experience stores that consumers are really looking for. But I think what's going to be more interesting coming out of that is the halo effect that puts the brand in a higher light among consumers. Yeah, that's pretty meaningful.
In this video, let's look into how Starbucks expanded its roots exponentially throughout the world. In 1994, Starbucks acquired the Coffee Connections, gaining the rights to use, make, market, and sell the Frappuccino beverage. The beverage was introduced under the Starbucks name in 1995, and by 2012, Starbucks had annual Frappuccino sales of over $2 billion. In July 1996, the first Starbucks location opened outside of North America, a store in Tokyo, Japan. On December 4, 1997, the Philippines became the third market to open outside of North America. In 1998, Starbucks entered the United Kingdom market by acquiring 56 outlets of UK-based Seattle Coffee Company, rebranding all those stores as Starbucks. In 1999, Starbucks experimented with eateries in the San Francisco Bay Area through a restaurant chain called Circadia. After people learned that these restaurants were owned by Starbucks, Starbucks converted the restaurants to Starbucks cafes. In July 2000, the first location opened in Australia, Sydney. In September 2002, Starbucks opened its first store in Latin America in Mexico City. By 2016, there were more than 500 locations in Mexico. In October 2002, Starbucks established a coffee trading company in Switzerland to handle purchase of green coffee. In April 2003, Starbucks acquired Seattle's Best Coffee and Italia from AFC Enterprises for $72 million, through which the company was able to open 150 more stores. In August 2003, Starbucks opened its first store in South America in Lima, Peru. In September 2006, rival Del Rey Coffee announced that it would sell most of its company-owned retail stores to Starbucks, including most locations of Oregon-based Coffee People, escalating regional coffee wars. Starbucks converted the Dedrick Coffee and Coffee People locations to Starbucks. In July 2007, the Starbucks location in the Forbidden City in Beijing closed. The location was controversial since its opening in 2000, with the protesters objecting that the presence of an American chain in this location was trampling on Chinese culture. In September 2007, the company opened its first store in Russia 10 years after first registering a trademark there. In March 2008, Starbucks acquired Coffee Equipment Company, the manufacturer of the Clover Brewing System. It began testing the fresh pressed coffee system at several Starbucks locations in Seattle, California, New York, and Boston. In 2008, Starbucks opened in Argentina, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, at the Czech Republic, and Portugal. From February 2008 to January 2009, during its Great Recession period, Starbucks terminated an estimated 18,400 US jobs and began closing 977 stores worldwide. In January 2011, Starbucks Corporation and Tata Coffee announced plans to begin opening Starbucks stores locations in India. In August 2012, the largest Starbucks in the US opened at the University of Alabama's Ferguson Center. On June 25, 2013, Starbucks began to post calorie counts on menus for drinks and pastries in all of its US stores. In July 2013, more than 10% of in-store purchases were made on customers' mobile devices via the Starbucks app. The company once again utilized the mobile platform when it launched the Tweet a Coffee promotion in October 2013. On this occasion, the promotion also involved Twitter, and customers were able to purchase a $5 gift card for a friend by entering both Tweet a Coffee and the friend's handle in a tweet. Research firm Keyhole monitored the progress of the campaign. A December 2013 media article reported that 27,000 people had participated and $180,000 of purchases had been made to date. In January 2014, as part of a change in compact direction, Starbucks management transitioned from a single brand worldwide to focusing on locally relevant design for each store. On March 21, 2018, Starbucks announced that it was considering the use of blockchain technology with an idea to connect coffee drinkers with coffee farmers who eventually can take advantage of new financial opportunities. The pilot program was planned to start with farmers in Costa Rica, Colombia, and Rwanda in order to develop a new way to track the bean to cup journey. In 2019, a Microsoft Build conference, the coffee company formally announced its Bean to Cup program using Microsoft's Azure-based blockchain service. In November 2019, Starbucks opened in its largest store ever in Michigan Avenue, Chicago, with 200 employees. On March 20, 2020, due to COVID-19 pandemic, Starbucks closed all the cafe-only stores in the United States for 2 weeks. During that time, only drive-through and delivery only were to function. According to the company representatives, all workers were to be paid for the next 30 days whether they went to work or stayed home. COVID-19 lockdowns caused Starbucks to suffer a general 10% sales decrease and a 50% decrease in China, where quarantine measures were especially strict. In May 2020, the company asked for reduced rent from landlords due to the decrease in sales. In June 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States, the company announced that it would close 400 of its locations in the US and Canada region over the subsequent 18 months as it moves from the coffee house concept to what it calls convenience-led formats with drive-through and curbside pickup. The new stores will work with the Starbucks mobile app for prepayment by the customer before arrival to pick up the order. The layout of some stores will also be modified with a separate counter for picking up mobile orders. The company also announced that it planned to open 300 stores that will primarily focus on carry-out and pick-up orders. In December 2020, Starbucks announced that it is planning to increase its store count to about 55,000 by 2030, up from roughly 33,000, which is right now. Now, let's look into how Starbucks expanded its roots throughout the world, leaving its mark wherever it went.
The incomparable goodness of coffee has now been captured in a cup.
Before Starbucks, I think in the mid-'70s, people were drinking really bad coffee. They were drinking instant coffee, Maxwell House U-Ban, and perking it at home, and it wasn't very good.
Your first cup of Starbucks coffee was?
In the Pike Place store in 1979, 1980, was a French press of Sumatra.
How much coffee is too much coffee?
I drink about 4 to 5 cups of coffee a day.
What do you say when doctors say cut down on your coffee?
To me, they don't say that. they don't say that. You just came for the day?
Just came for the day. You're the highlight of our day.
Oh.
Yeah, you are.
Thank you for your compliment.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. When I came here for the first time, had never been in a Starbucks store. Walked into this very store, and by the way, we have changed nothing through the years. This is the original store as is. And they handed me a cup of coffee made this way. Now, this is a cup of Sumatra, which is Indonesian coffee. This is how I tasted my first cup of coffee. And I just knew from that moment on that I was home. Did I ever imagine that we would one day have stores in 65 countries serving almost 80 million customers a week? No. Growing up in Brooklyn in the projects in the early 60s, what I would loosely describe as the other side of the tracks, provides a deep sense of understanding that there's a world out there that's very, very different than the world that is inside where we grew up. And I wanted to be part of that world. When I finished school, I got hired by a great company, and that was Xerox. And I worked there for a number of years, but I just didn't feel I belonged in a very structured environment. So I left Xerox and I went to work for a large Swedish company that was starting a U.S. consumer division. In a very roundabout way, they had a customer in Seattle, Washington called Starbucks. Their aspiration at the time was to expand to Portland, Oregon. I somewhat persuaded them that perhaps Starbucks' opportunity was bigger and they needed someone like me. You have to understand, Starbucks had 3 stores in '82, but the core business was just selling pounds of ground and roasted coffee for home use. A year after I joined the company, I went to Italy for the first time. First of all, you can't walk through any major city or town in Italy without running into a coffee bar and seeing the sense of community and the romance and theater around espresso. It just made me realize that Starbucks perhaps was not in the right part of the coffee business, that the real business and the opportunity was the integration of the beverage to creating a destination and a sense of community in the store. What I experienced in Italy was something that was transferable in the U.S. Bring, for the first time, great coffee, introduce new beverages that no one ever heard of. No one heard of a cafe latte before. I raced home to talk to the founders about the experience I had, and they rejected it. Over a period of 2 years, I left Starbucks to start my own chain of Italian coffee bars. At that time, Starbucks found itself in financial difficulties. And so the founder came to me and said, I can't think of Starbucks in better hands than if it was in your hands. I realize you don't have the money. I'll give you X amount of time to try and find it. I was able to buy Starbucks in August of '87. They had 6 stores at the time for $3.8 million. I didn't, at that point, have an understanding that coffee would one day become part of the culture or the zeitgeist in ways that I couldn't possibly understand or predict. I think we realized early on that what we had to do is everything had to prove itself in the cup. The ability to source and roast the highest quality Arabica beans in the world gave us the platform to do things that would define and build an industry that did not exist. Many people at the time were convinced Starbucks was too strong, and we had to educate the market and the customer about, no, this is what coffee should taste like. And there you have it.
I done been around the world, ain't nobody else that could do it like us with nobody help. When the chips about to fall and I'm back against the wall, know it's only one place I call. All roads lead home, home, home. Yeah, all roads lead home.